Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to video number 3 in my card series, Quick and Easy Cards. Today's card is a watercolor card, and the reason why this video is so long is because I did it in 4 different mediums so you could compare them. I'll be using Ranger Distress Watercolor cardstock. It comes in A2 size. I'm using the sentiment from this Altenew Oriental Orchid set. It's just such a pretty sentiment. And for my first one, I'm going to be using the Gansai Tambi watercolors. I have a red, an orange, and a yellow. I have a very thick brush that holds a lot of water and a big jar of water. So the first thing I'm going to do is wipe off a little water just because I don't want to get it too wet, is I'm going to outline my area with water. And this is going to contain my color into this rectangular area. I'm going to color it in. Now you don't want to use too much water, just dampen it up so that the color will spread and it won't dry quickly. All right, I'm going to start with my first color here, and you can see when it goes on, it is a very, very bright red. It's going to automatically spread out to the edge of the water that I used on the cardstock before I applied the color. But that was just a guide, and I can always extend it because it was kind of hard to see when I was doing the water. I just wanted to make sure I had some moisture down on the paper. So you can see this color is very bright and it's kind of thick. You don't see a lot of water in it. And the cardstock does a good job of blending the colors together. It is very, very textured, and we'll find out a little bit more about that later. But it absorbs the water well because it's very thick. And normally I don't like to use Ranger watercolor paper, and that's because when you brush it, it pills up very quickly. But I'm not really brushing it that much. I'm just barely tapping it. So when I'm doing a wash like this, it's totally fine to use this cardstock. Now for my last one, I'm going to put yellow, but I'm going to start at the bottom. And the reason why I'm doing that is, and I'm going to do that each time with all the different mediums, is because I want to make sure I get a pure yellow without any pink or red in there. So I'll start at the bottom and work my way up. And once I hit that other color, it'll start to blend. I don't want to blend it too much because then my yellow will disappear, and I definitely don't want that to happen. And I'm going to make sure I get a nice clean edge all along the rectangular area. I want it to be nice, as straight as possible. And the water will kind of push the color to the edge and make a nice kind of hard-lined edge. And you don't want to overdo it, so I'm going to stop there and work on my next set of colors. I'm using the Peerless watercolor, and I'm going to use the same watercolor paper and the same technique. So I'm going to lay down some water in a rectangular block here with the same brush. And you want to just get it moist. You don't want pools of water. I tried to pick colors as close as I could to the Gansai just so we could have a good comparison. I'm going to start with Scarlet Cake at the top, and you can see it's very, very bright red, and it's pretty watery, but you still get that vibrant color. So I'm going to pull the color down a little bit, push it all the way to the edge, and you can see it running inside the texture of this paper. And you can see how I'm dealing with quite a bit of watery paint. And then look at what I did in the lower left-hand corner. Now, there is no way this is going to be fixed. And you can see I'm noticing it right now. I'm like, oh boy, okay, it was on my finger. So we're going to have to start over. So I'm going to start over, and I didn't get a fresh glass of water. So I started to put the water on there. I'm like, oh, this is too pink. And then I went off to get some clean water. And I don't know if you just saw that, but I touched the paper with my finger again. So I tried to put some water on it and pick it up, and it just wasn't working. So third time is a charm. I'm going to try this one more time, and we're going to put the water on the cardstock, same as before. I'm just going to speed through that super fast, and so you've already seen me do it a few times. Okay, same results as the first time with the Scarlet Cake. I'm going to spread it across. You can see it's very watery. So the Gansai Tambi is a much thicker paint, and this is a thinner paint. But you'll see as I continue on and apply more color that even though it's a little thinner and more watery, it still gives you that intense color. Anyway, so I'm going to pull this color down, and you can see that it's running through the texture of the paper. And I'm going to move on to this pink color, which is extremely bright. And notice that I got some of the water off on a tissue because I found that this brush really is holding a ton of water, and I don't want to get too much water on my brush because then I'll get some more water stains and I won't get the vibrancy of the color that I want. So I'm just going to dip it in here and there, and I'm going to pull the color down and blend it at the edge, and you can see that these colors tend to blend more on their own than the Gansai were doing. So I don't have to brush it as much as I had to brush the first set. And I think it actually blended a little too much there at the top. So I'm going to get more color, and I want to be careful here not to add too much water back in. So if you're going to put your brush over where you've already watercolored, make sure that you have more color on your brush and not as much water. And I'll show you what happens when you just try to go back to this kind of technique with just water. So for now, I'm just going to move on to the yellow here, which is a really super bright yellow. Same thing starting at the bottom, and the only thing you have to be careful of here is the pink drying before you have a chance to blend those together. So you can see my pink has started to dry a little bit, but it's really not that big of a deal. I'm going to finish off my yellow, and then I'm going to go back in and add some more pink, which will blend that line out, so I won't be able to see. And it is going to start blending downward a little bit more into my yellow, but I'm okay with it. I'm not going to put too much on, just on that edge where the yellow and the pink meet. So I kind of fixed it on the right side. Now I'm going to fix it a little bit more on the left side, and notice that I'm taking the water off my brush so that I don't have too much water. Once you start adding water, the colors will start to fade. So I'm just going to dab in very carefully some extra color here, some of the extra pink. And also notice that I tend to pause in between colors to let it blend a little bit and see what happens before I do anything else. I did notice that there was a little bit of the faded pink in the middle, so I added a little bit extra. Notice not as much water, and that way I fill in the gap. All right, moving on to my third attempt here, and this is Distress ink. I'm using candied apple, picked raspberry, and squeezed lemonade, so I'm just going to put some of that on my craft mat. And then I'll use that same brush, same technique. I'm going to speed through putting the water on the cardstock in the same way in that rectangular pattern. I'm going to start with my candied apple, and you can see it goes on much more muted and diluted. But the thing is, you'll notice that as I move on to the other colors, the more ink you use, the more vibrant it's going to be. And you can also put multiple layers on here. So you can see I keep picking up more and more of the candied apple, and it is getting darker and darker. So you do have some flexibility in doing something lighter or darker when you're doing this. And so you see the picked raspberry is much brighter. So I'm dropping this in, and it also spreads really quickly. The Distress inks are very reactive with water, and I'm barely even picking up some of this picked raspberry. And it goes on, it spreads, it blends. It's a really easy kind of paint to work with. And then I'm going to go back in with that apple, and you can see that it's getting even darker as I put on another layer. And finally, I have my squeezed lemonade. I'm noticing that I need a little less water with these Distress ink pads, so I'm wiping my brush a little bit more often. And I'm going to pick up some more of that color, start at the bottom and work my way up, being careful that it could dry while I do this, so I'm going to try to work a little bit faster. So I'm going to wait till the last minute to blend this. So I'm going to get as much yellow as I can here, and then once I'm ready, I can grab a little bit more yellow, some water here, and I'll go over the line between the two colors. And you can see it blends really well. It didn't really dry while I was working on that yellow. But with the water, these inks spread quickly. So you can see some of it went down and around the edge and created this puddle of kind of orange at the bottom. So all I did was take a tissue, and I just barely tapped the corner of my tissue, and it soaked up the color without removing any of the base color underneath. So I decided to stop here with the Distress ink. So here we are. These are the Gansai, the Peerless here, the second one, and then my Distress ink pads. I did do the Gansai Tambi on some Canson watercolor paper, which is much thinner, and I'm going to show you that here. And you can see how it's not as vibrant, and what I did was I went back in with water to try to blend them without color, and that's what happens when you do that, so it kind of spreads the color out of the way. These are Distress crowns, so I just wanted to show you how that looks. I just put some crayon on the cardstock, and then I just blended it out with a brush and some water. So here are the results, and what I decided was that I liked the Peerless the best, so I continued on with that panel. I'm going to stick it down in my MISTI with some surgical tape because it is a little bit warped, and I'm going to arrange my sentiment in the center and put it on the lid here. And I decided to start off with some Ranger Archival ink because it's pretty juicy and it's dark, and I wanted to make sure that you could really see it on top of this watercolor. And I was surprised that it really left a faded image, so I decided to try it one more time. So I'm going to ink this up again with the Archival ink and stamp it down, and still it was kind of faded, and so I was really not happy with that. So I decided to take my VersaFine ink because it's a pigment ink and it tends to lay on top of the cardstock. So I'm going to try that. It darkened it up, but still it was faded in some areas. I thought, well, I'll just do another coat of it. So I tried it another time, and still there were some white spots in that "so" word. So I'm like, all right, I'm moving on to Hero Hues, which is a very juicy pad that I have. And so I inked it up with that to see if that made a difference. And it was a little bit darker, but still missing some spots. Tried it again with the Hero Arts Hero Hues Black. And after this, I decided, you know what, this paper, it really doesn't matter what ink you use, you're gonna have to fill in any solid sentiments that are large. So I took a Stampin' Up! Marker and I just filled in the white areas with this pen, and it worked just fine. So my next step here is totally optional. This is supposed to be a quick and easy card, and this sort of makes it a little bit not so easy and quick. I took my white gel pen and I outlined the "so" in the middle. I like how it really made it pop, but it's really not necessary to do this. And it was a little bit difficult to do because it is a broad tip pen. So anyway, I like the way it turned out. If you want to do this, you can. You don't have to. When I'm finished with that, I decided to add one more detail, and that is black splatters, which is a quick and easy thing you can do to add some interest. I'm going to use my Gansai Tambi black palette. It just gives the best splatters. I put some water on my brush, dipped it in, and I'm going to do a couple of light splatters. And I decided I needed more water, but I'm just going to barely tap the top of the water. I don't want to put the whole brush in because then I'm going to get too much water. A little tap will give me just enough water to get thicker splatters and finish up this card. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll take a Hero Arts black note card and put some ATG tape runner on the back here, and I've cut it to have a 1/8 of an inch mat all the way around and put it right there in the center. And that is the quick and easy card for today. So I hope you enjoyed that comparison, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.